Stephen Meizler is the cinematographer of House Plumbers on HBO. I'm David Buchanan with Gold Derby. Stephen, I wanted to start by asking you, when you got that call from director Dave Mandel that he wanted you to join a Watergate series, what were your very first thoughts on how to tackle the subject?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I think Watergate to me is really interesting. It's one of my memories as a kid. I was 6 years old when Nixon resigned, and I just have um, a really vivid memory of where I was and knowing that time and knowing that era. So it's such uh, um, a zeitgeist moment of the moment that uh, I liked. I've There's so many shows about Watergate and there's so many different things, but this perspective and showing the actual what actually happened in the break-ins and to know, and everyone talks about Watergate, but no one, it's more about Nixon resigning and not knowing. I've always been confused, and it's always something that I never. There's so many names of so many people involved, and I never really sort of I wanted to know the real story.
Yeah, it's what the series does so well, as you're alluding to, is really gives us all the lead up to Watergate. We don't just see the break-in and the aftermath, but we get a lot of, the kind of backstory of the players. And you alluded to something I wanted to ask you next, which is there are a lot of films and kind of, fictionalizations, dramatizations of Watergate over the years. When you were prepping, did you look at those materials to kind of get ideas or to think about what you wanted to do differently, or did you try to avoid, kind of revisiting, some of the landmarks of the genre?
No, I think one of the things that connected David and I is we both love 70s political espionage thrillers. And the obvious one is All the President's Men, and we talked about that obviously a lot. And I it's one of my favorite. I love. I've not just from this, but I've always really loved that. The cinematographer Gordon Willis is a real hero of mine. And the way that story is told is really fantastic. But we didn't, obviously. David said he wanted this to sort of be a sister thing to that, um, and be a reflection of that. And it's there when, and I didn't want to obviously copy it, but it's definitely an influence. We actually looked more at Parallax View as a more stylistic sort of influence for us, using that the paranoia of Parallax View and what happens to Warren Beatty's character was kind of felt more in a language of what we were trying to tell in the paranoia that Hunt, more specifically Hunt, I guess, than Liddy goes through. Using there's a lot of different low angles and of showing ceilings in Parallax View that we kind of leaned into, and sort of like the sky is falling on these people who don't really know, but yet we shoot at a low angle, so put them in a powerful spot, so they look powerful, but yet there's something going on above them. And I think those sort of things worked well with us.
Yeah, no question. And we'll dive into a lot of the character work and especially the break-in in a moment. I just want to ask one more kind of big picture question before we get there, which is, I think people who've started the series, so I think about 3 of the 5 will have aired by the time this comes out. The tone of the series is so interesting because it starts out really, Dave used the word goofy. It's very kind of hijinks and funny. And as it kind of barrels, towards the break-in and beyond and the aftermath, the tone changes quite a lot. It's very serious as you're talking about the anxiety that the characters feel. When you kind of saw the scripts and were mapping out, the work, how do you kind of account for and work with these very big kind of shifts in tone? Does it affect, or how does it affect the work that you do, behind the camera?
I think it was very tricky to sort of keep the dual tone. I think that to me was the biggest challenge, is to kind of ride the line between that kind of paper comedy versus sort of thriller drama espionage sort of. One thing we did is one of the comedy is to use more wider lenses. So we were definitely using wider lenses closer to the characters to sort of embrace the comedy. And even within that, one of our visual language tactics was keeping Hunt and Lydia in a two-shot as much as we could, almost that's their single, and really seeing them, especially in the humorous moments, really play off each other. And that, to me, a lot of the humor comes from that. It still worked later on, even when it still gets more serious, but we definitely went to tighter lenses and um, more of a grittier, maybe a little more grittier lighting, a little more. Although the lighting, it's hard. I didn't really want to like really have bright lighting for the comedy and really dark for the serious. It's not sort of that sort of thing. It sort of had we had to keep it that sort of keep it in the same, all in the same world, not to leave. Everything had to be subtle. Going from wide lenses to the tighter lenses couldn't be too much of a dramatic shift to really to not make sure the audience doesn't get out of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive into the actual break-in attempts, multiple, because we get to see the 4 different attempts to bug the DNC at the Watergate. You've talked a little bit about, the kind of angles that you're using and shots and lenses, but I really want to dive into the 4th attempt itself, because what I love about that is we really get to see the immediate panic when things go awry. And I just absolutely love the work that you and Dave do on capturing, those immediate moments after. So take us into trying to capture the frenzy, the panic, like I said, just incredible work behind the camera and from Woody and Justin.
I have to say that that scene specifically where they're gathering all the stuff in the room, and I was handheld, and I like to operate the camera. Um, and especially Justin's take. I mean, both were hysterical, but Justin went on, and there were times when I couldn't. I almost dropped the camera because I was laughing so hard. I've never laughed so like he was Buster Keaton. It was pure amazing. I would love to show that actually take through the 2 minutes of that. I watch. I could, that itself is its own humor thing. I wish there's, I know there's, it's out there, but I wish it was it could be shown. But what's so strange is that we are really showing that this actually happened, that all this humor is coming from something that's so dark and twisted. And we're shooting in the actual room, in the room that they had it in. We were shooting in Watergate. We stayed there, and we were, I mean, most of the series was upstate New York, but we did shoot a few weeks at the end, and especially that break-in. And it really, to me, that it brings another interesting thing about the Watergate complex itself, and really, I really wanted to strive to show it as a character. But that room 214 where Hunt and Liddy were at, was right above like 50 feet away from the door that they broke into. The amount of hubris that these guys had of just, why not have a room at the other side of the complex? They chose the one that's right there. The supreme idiocy of these people, of what they did, and you're like, what's going on? It was really interesting to see, and to, Watergate itself is the actual building is such a bizarre, sort of amorphous, sort of big building that is its own character. It's almost a monster in itself.
Absolutely. I did want to ask you about shooting on location, because in that same break-in episode, I think it's in that episode, we have a great kind of exterior shot with the monuments, a really important conversation between Hunt and Liddy. Really, I think, important for how it shapes the rest of the series. It's really an important midpoint. Talk about shooting on location. I mean, they're absolutely beautiful shots and a really kind of haunting conversation playing out, against the backdrop of some of our, national monuments.
I feel so lucky. We got to shoot in the courtyard in the EOB. I don't think anyone else has been able to do that. And just the access we had to shoot at the Lincoln Memorial, and to do that, and to get the right time, we had the right, it's sort of the dusks, we were able to capture that. I feel privileged. It's so privileged to be able to do something like that, and to be on you definitely get a sense of uh, that even though we're telling a story of something that's a really dark side of America, there's still something really positive in being at these places. That there were a lot of great moments at these places too, even though we're showing the dark side. That there's still a lot of greatness there.
Yeah, and beautifully captured. Something else too, before we talk about the families of the characters, which is so interesting. Just more on location, but particularly your exterior shots, because I find throughout the 5 episodes some really incredible work on seeing it the way I watch it, how the buildings kind of tower over the characters. We get some really interesting work with perspective on, watching a John Dean leave the building, and the buildings are so grand and elaborate, and I love the way you capture them, and even like the Beverly Hilton in the first episode, just really nice shots. Talk about working with exteriors, and what kind of commentary you were aiming for with the way you're capturing the characters relative to these historic sites.
Well, I thought was what was really interesting in Washington that the actually three buildings. It's not the in the story, the three major buildings, the EOB, Watergate complex, and Creep building, and they're all really close. Especially the Creep building is across the street from the EOB, and Watergate's just less than it's all very close to each other, and especially the EOB, which I really didn't know as a building until I was really there. And it's obviously right next to the White House, but it's not something I even, I can't even say that I even knew what the building was. And like looking at it and filming it, I'm like, I've never really seen this building, and it's there, and it's been there for forever. Obviously, it's a really, Nixon had an office in the EOB where he was actually doing all the where he was doing a lot of nefarious stuff. It's trying to, so this is and it's a really Baroque, another really strange structure. Again, all this between Watergate and these two places in Washington, that is, I feel all the other places, and I don't know if I'm getting into a sort of a feel of the architecture of DC, but there's so much more taste to the White House and an understatement to all the other monuments, and there's sort of a tasteful that actual EOB and Watergate are kind of outliers in this, and it was fun to sort of use those as the characters.
Yeah, that makes a great deal of sense. Let's talk about the other characters on the series, the Hunt and Liddy families, especially how you capture Howard Hunt's family. When I talked to Dave again, he mentioned that it was all handheld, like you were saying about the kind of hotel suite frenzy. To really capture the anxiety that the characters and the claustrophobia of what's going on in the Hunt household. Talk about the choice, that making that decision, and also just working with, it's such an interesting familial dynamic because we have Dorothy Hunt, who's involved but kind of on the sidelines, and then the kids, who are all such unique and kind of different characters from their parents. So just talk about trying to capture all of that energy in the Hunt household.
Well, it's definitely a different kind of handheld than the mania of the break-ins that we were trying to have. I was trying to be a little more subtle and just a little off, that that he's not that Hunt's not really comfortable there, that there's something is always a little that's not his place to be. Yet it is a place full of earth tones and earth, like it's a very grounded, and but there's a messiness to it. There's it's life, and it's something especially contrasted to when we go to all these nice, really stylized, and trying to really show off what his work life is really getting into his head and showing the difference of what he really wants to be doing in his life and where his priorities are, and setting up his his lack of priorities, or lack of what is really important, until he realizes it, until it's too late.
There's also, speaking of Dorothy, a great montage in the 4th episode, which people will just about now be seeing. We won't kind of give away what's going on in case people haven't watched it yet, but it's a great kind of montage of many different scenes and moments. Talk about putting that together, because that's another moment that's really stylized and a lot of fun and really helps capture who Dorothy is as a character. So what was it like to kind of put that together with all the other departments?
Well, originally it was went to a James Brown song. So whenever we went to each location, we would be playing this James Brown song. So it had a different energy than actually the song that was put in, which I thought was kind of humorous. Um, it was a lot of fun. That to me was more fun putting it together with David and just kind of finding those locations. It was a little production was kind of like, do we really need to do this? Because it's shooting one shot in a lot of different places. But I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a really it's a fun sequence and something, and especially in an episode that's so serious. I don't know if that's giving it away, but that gives it some breathability.
I don't think it'll be a spoiler to say that we do see some of the trials and the hearings by the time the series ends. We won't say, what happens in case people don't remember, but I wanted to ask you about shooting those. You have, those are moments where you really have a lot of footage, right? These, the hearings were televised. So working with that kind of material, but also how do you work on building tension in sequences where a lot of people do know, how these events unfold and play out? What is it like to try to build, anxiety and tension on events that people know and we have footage of? Just talk about working with, the footage that we have and doing your own thing with it.
I think to me, what I find interesting in those moments is it's you're in to say this and not give it away, because you bring up a really interesting point, and I guess I can talk about this in a more broad way. Is that in those situations where that the lights are on and are very bright in those angles, and so to me it's really interesting to go off those angles to really find the darkness in those moments, and switching those angles, and especially there it shows its way, and gets more distinct as we go on.
Before I let you go, Stephen, I just want to ask you, one of my favorite moments is so small, but it's in the second episode where Dita Beard is lighting her cigarette on the stove. I love that shot. I love the transition. So exciting. So just wanted to ask you, if you could pick one, what is your favorite shot or sequence in the 5 episodes of White House Plumbers?
I will go back to it. I know I switched. I'm gonna go into episode 3 because I won't say the one in episode 5 because that'll give it away, which is really my favorite shot. But the shot in episode 3 where Dean comes out of the EOB and talks to Justin, and that scene is there's a part of that where we see Dean and Justin, part of that scene, in shadow with the EOB brightly lit, and I was made sure that I was really fighting to make sure we were going to shoot it where we had them in shadow and them in sun, and to show that again of these looming structures, and that was like it hit it on so many levels, and it's such a really, the acting is so fantastic. We actually shot it originally in New York, in Albany, in which has some DCS things, but it was when we shot it, it was a very good scene, and it was something that with VFX we would have done something interesting to it, and obviously had to do some period cleanup when we shot it again. But when we kept on pushing to do it a second time, and man, I'm so glad we did it a second time, because to me it's a really powerful scene, and that shooting in the real place, I felt really lends it to it.
Yeah, great call out. Absolutely, really memorable, stunning moment. Stephen Meizler, congratulations on White House Plumbers. Thanks so much for talking to Gold Derby today.
Thanks, David. I appreciate you having me.